Hey, in this video, I'm going to make a sample-based beat for the Producer's Corner Sample Challenge 314. Recently, I've been studying Ableton Live and I'm bringing my MPC workflow over to the DAW. And if you stay with me all the way to the end, I will show you some tools and techniques that will prevent your hard drive to stack up on those beat sketches. Because when you make a beat, it's much better to have them finished and published. Let's go! And if you're a beat maker and you want to level up your sounds and productions immensely, I would strongly recommend you to join up in the community of the Producer's Corner with DJ Stress and Rocco. They have a live stream every week. You can jump in at any time and do the sample challenges. The link is in the description to everything you need to jump in. First things first when it comes to this sample challenge. So this is the number 314, and I have a playlist that was published on Chris McManus's Facebook page. I also have a link to that specific playlist down in the description below. You can check that out. Okay, so first things first, and this is the most important thing because these are the samples and this is what separates your beat from any other beat. You can always pick out some random generic drum samples and make a beat out of that with some bass lines and what have you, but when you do samples, you really get your own expression in because this is the art of sampling. So here's a playlist. Then the first thing I do is I'll listen through. My mindset has always been that you have to sample from records. But I know that the old school producer, the real old school producer, you know, I'm old school like from the 90s, but real old school producers, they use turntables. They would always do creative stuff because their equipment was really limited and you had to do with what you had, right? But in these days, we have everything. We have access to give or take all the records that has ever been made. It's readily available on YouTube. You can just go there, search up whatever you want, and you will get it. Starting out with these sample challenges, I went to the store and bought the record that I needed for the challenge. So the first challenge I joined in was a Star Wars challenge, and so I went and bought the Star Wars record. Star Wars soundtrack record. I found it, I had it on wax, and that was my mindset back then. But as I joined the sample challenge, every week it was impossible to go out every week and buy new records. I didn't have the money, I didn't have the time, so I went along and did the YouTube thing that is also linked in the description, of course, and the playlist. So here it is. There are several tracks here. Some are really known, some are more unknown or more obscure. And here's an example of a very known sample. I always steer clear from that unless I get a great idea on how to flip it in a really creative way that hasn't been done before. So what I usually do, I use the MPC and I will record what I need into the MPC as clips. I will record them as clips into the MPC. But here is Ableton Live. It's a slightly different workflow, but I use the same workflow nonetheless, and with some small tweaks because it's another environment. So here I have Ableton Live. I load up an instance of Simpler. In fact, I load up several blank instances of Simpler because this is my go-to sampler in Ableton. And what I've done before is that these songs on the playlists have been converted to MP3 for convenience. I just use whatever app. I just Google YouTube to MP3 and I'll get a lot of shady ads, but I can live with that. So then I have my folder with MP3s and then I will load them into Simpler one by one. So one song per Simpler instance. And then I chop them up. So I go into the slice section and I'll select how it's chopped up. I need to do some tweaks. By default, it's set to transient, but I prefer beat. And I try to leave warp mode turned off. And then I search for samples. I might go into the classic mode sometimes. There I can scrub the whole MP3 file back and forth. But in the slice section, I will then start to experiment. I might need to adjust the attack a bit and adjust maybe some of the slices to hit better on the beat. It's sort of limited how precise the auto function is. And then I start playing with my keyboard. I hit K to make the keyboard into a piano and then I just start jamming. and I'll jam and I'll jam. And this time I didn't really love any of the songs. I didn't really feel the samples this time, but I have decided that I'm going to make a beat from this, so my feelings has to be set aside. That's my view of it. So I set my feelings aside and I'll jam until I get something, and it sounds a little something like this. Okay, so that was a basic loop, a 4-bar loop, and then I know that I need something more because it becomes boring to only have one sample going. It can work fine if the sample is a 10 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10. It can work, such as, you know, DJ Premier has a lot of those beats that are only one sample and a drum loop. Come Clean with Jerry the Damager. It's really minimalistic, but it's a 10 out of 10 when it comes to choice of samples and chops. But in this exact case, I know that I need some more, so I have to search the other songs. I think I've found something right here. I'm just jamming on top of this other sample. So I've decided for this to be the loop, and now I'm jamming to find something that fits, that matches, that can be used as maybe transitional effects, or maybe as a second layer, or maybe as a hook, or who knows. Okay, so it's all about jamming, finding the flow, get a feel of it. Even though my feelings are set aside, it's like a duality here where I'm really not that much into this particular playlist, but I'll do my best even though. And then when I finally feel that it's settled, that I have enough content in the samples, in the loop, like I have this main loop, I have this other alternative loop over here, which might be the hook, and I have some hits or stabs or licks or what you want to call it, then it's time to move over to the drums. So here comes the drum section. And I will do this really simple because you already hear in the main loop there's a drum loop going on. Especially the snare is quite prominent. So what I do is I load up a folder that I have, and I'm sharing it with you as well. So it's a really nice folder of 20 kicks, 20 snares, 20 hi-hats, some basses, and some transitional effects that I have collected over the years, and those are some of my favorite samples to use. You can download it. The link is in the description. It's absolutely free. And I've always find something here. So I have found a kick, and I found a snare, and I feel that these two combined makes a good job. They fit in together and they make sense in the context of the loop. And I just used the Ableton drum rack to get this moving on. And I jam until I found something that makes sense. I have actually two kicks. One kick that's the main kick, and one kick that alternates a bit to just give it some movement, some extra vibe, some extra rhythmical structure. And I'm thinking about, should I do something with the groove here, because the groove is really swingy. I don't know if I like it to be that swingy, but if I start doing that, there will be artifacts because the sample is the way it is. I can always time stretch it, but I've tried it and it doesn't work. The sounds are in a frequency where that doesn't make a lot of sense. It becomes really obvious when I time stretch it. I'll leave it alone for now. Maybe I'll do something in Logic later on, because I will eventually export this to Logic to do the arrangement. That will be the next video. You can also hear in the sample there is a nice hi-hat. I don't like to exaggerate hi-hats. I think hi-hats are great for inducing energy and inserting some movement and emotion. And those hi-hats that are in there is more than enough. They're more than sufficient. And if I at a later point want to extract the hi-hats from the mix, I can just use a filter and notch it out, almost completely removing them without removing other parts of the same loop. So yeah, so that was the drums. And if you had any value out of this at this point, hit the like button. I would really appreciate it, because, you know, the algorithms and all that good stuff. And the final thing I'm going to talk about is the bass, because that's the final thing that I insert into the composition. The sub bass is basically a sine wave in most cases when I produce, but I need some more bass, and I already hear here that in the main loop sample there is a bass going on, but I think it's a bit weak and it's a bit anonymous. Just to make sure, I'll make a bass line separate and I will include this into the arrangement, and I have the choice later on to just remove it if I don't need it. Maybe it's sufficient with the bass that's already in the loop, but I don't take any chances. I want to have the best possible framework to go on with. So in this case, when it comes to the bass, I load up a BA1 from Baby Audio. It's an old school toy-ish synthesizer, which really isn't a toy. It's a real professional piece of equipment. However, what I notice is that it has got a lot of nice vibe, but it doesn't have a sine wave to make subs. I will come back to that later. But it was quite easy, I think, to tweak this synthesizer. I start with the default and I just play with the controls, play with the filters, with the attack and release section, the envelopes, messing a bit around with the oscillators and the LFO, and make it sound a bit with a bit of a movement, but not too much, and insert some grit as well. So this is a really nice synthesizer plugin. I think I dialed in a really nice bass, at least a texturized bass. I always think of bass in terms of two things. One is the sub bass, which is underneath 100 hertz. Everything under there I call the sub, and everything above is the texturized bass, which isn't really that earth-shattering bass, but it could be as well. And that bass is more stereo. It can be more stereo if needed, with more saturation, and that's the bass you hear when you play it back on your phone, for example. So I ended up using this BA1 synth, which hasn't got much to do with the bass in the sample chops. It has more to do with the groove and the melody. So it sounds like this. And what I found is that it's not earth-shattering enough, so I went back to the bass folder in my free sample pack that you can download with the link in the description. And I found another bass that suited the bill perfectly. It's a bass sample, but it's based off of a sine wave with a little bit of fatness to it. So this really helped fulfilling the low end together with the kick. Those two played perfectly well together, and as you will see later on at the mixing stage, there's really not much else needed to do with the kick and the bass relationship because they fitted so well together initially. So as you can see, my sequence is samples first, then drums, and then finally bass. And what's your sequence? I want to know. Hit me up in the comments. And let me also know in the comments, what was your biggest takeaway from this video with me showing you my workflow? Let me know. Now comes the most important part, because now I have a sketch. I have a 4-bar sketch, which is absolutely worthless unless I do something about it. Okay, I can export it right now as a stereo file, leaving me this much to play with, or I could just duplicate this loop all across the Ableton Live timeline, and I can export it as a 3-minute beat and call it a day, with no variation, with all the stuff that is going on, unmixed. Or you can check out this video right there, where I go deep into how I arranged this 4-bar loop into a full, complete beat with variations, transitions. And if you're still watching this, you are one of my favorite types of people. I thank you so much, and I hope I see you in the next video. Peace!